Welcome back to Vantage. On a rainy day in London, I am vicariously escaping to somewhere a little bit more sunny. We've got someone who manages a fund that focuses on Vietnam. We are going to learn a little bit about what's driving that economy, the themes that he's looking to explore, and how he manages investing in a frontier market. Let's go take a look. Welcome back to Vantage. We're focusing in an area where actually quite a lot of UK investors got an interest. Delighted to have Craig Martin from Vietnam Holding here. Craig, for those of us who don't know Vietnam Holdings particularly well, maybe you could just tell us a little bit about it and your respective role.
Sure. Vietnam Holding is an investment company listed on the premium segment of the London Stock Exchange. And all it does is invest in quality public companies in Vietnam. And Craig Martin, I'm the executive chairman of Dynam Capital, and we manage that portfolio on behalf of our investors.
Okay. Vietnam looks like it's a sort of dynamic place with some interesting sort of secular growth drivers. Explain to us how you are expressing your investments, how you're sort of positioning yourselves in terms of sectors and ways to play out those themes.
Well, we see there's three main mega trends. There's an industrialisation trend, there's an urbanisation trend, and a domestic consumption trend.
Yeah.
The industrialisation trend, very simply, is made in Vietnam. Manufacturers, global manufacturers, relocating some or all of their production in Vietnam. Big source of foreign direct investment.
Yeah.
And for us, that throws out opportunities in the business-to-business linkages, the logistics, the shipping companies, for example. The second trend is urbanisation. Urbanisation is the percentage of a population that lives in cities. In Vietnam, that rate is 38%. That's where Europe was in the 1950s.
Yeah.
Now that's where China was in the year 2000. And then China doubled its urbanisation in just 20 years. So we think Vietnam's urbanisation rate will increase, and that means they'll need more quality housing, more affordable housing as well, more schools, more hospitals, more modern trade, convenience stores, that kind of thing. And then the third mega trend is the rise of the domestic consumer. Today, per capita GDP in Vietnam has crossed the $4,000 mark. Now that's a very interesting inflection point. When Thailand got to that level, its economy doubled again in 7 years. When China got to that level, its economy doubled again in 5 years.
Yeah.
So we're at an inflection point in the domestic consumer. So that means more brands, more convenience stores, more shopping centres. We're at an inflection point in the urbanisation story. That means more real estate opportunities in the longer term. And then made in Vietnam. Vietnam is a critical part of the world's supply chain, increasingly relevant in today's geopolitical environment.
And that's great to understand the sort of broad themes. What I'd really like to do to bring those to life is to connect those to actually individual companies. So maybe you don't need to get into too much detail, but how you're playing out each of these themes with, one of your holdings.
Sure. So industrialization, so the modernization of the economy, rather than pick, say, one manufacturer or one company that makes Apple AirPods or iPads, which is a bit risky, we prefer to look at the business-to-business linkages. So one of our core holdings is Gemadep. It's one of the largest port operators in Vietnam. It's also one of the operators of an air cargo business. So it's a great play on the growth in import and export. And don't forget, Vietnam is actually a very open economy. 200% of its GDP is reflected by its imports and its exports. So that's, for us, a great way to play the industrialization theme. Another interesting way to play that theme is through the banks, which are the underpinning of that financial services. In the domestic consumer, we look at retailers. One of our businesses is a jewelry company. It has 360 retail outlets for jewelry. And the Vietnamese people, as they get wealthier, they're looking to consume more, and that's a great local brand playing into that space.
So we've covered off the themes and some of the holdings. Now, what I'd like to understand is your investment philosophy. Your approach to investing. How should we regard you? Are you like a Warren Buffett? What drives effectively your investment philosophy and the way you go about investing in companies?
Well, Vietnam Holdings started in 2006. In that same year, the United Nations introduced the Principles for Responsible Investing.
Yeah.
And Vietnam Holding was the first signatory in Vietnam to those principles in 2009. And my colleague Tin, myself and our team, we really have responsible investing at the heart of our investment process. It's not just to feel good in the morning when we look in the mirror, we use it as an investment tool.
Yeah.
So in Vietnam today, there are about 1,600 public companies. And we're trying to build a concentrated portfolio of 25 to 30 names. So we use our ESG, our environmental social governance checklist and approach to filter out the bad from the good and the good from the great, and put the great into our portfolio. We also use it to help manage the downside in our portfolio and panic early. So if we see companies where they start to drift in their governance or in their investor relations or their transparency, that's a negative for us, and we can then exit those companies. So ESG is integrated into every aspect of our investment process. And for us, it's very simple. We want to do more, measure more, report more to our investors on what we're doing, and also to help train and educate our portfolio companies to do likewise. Over time, those companies, even though they're Vietnamese companies, they will be held to an increasingly international set of standards around carbon footprint measurement, around sustainability reporting. And it's very new. They're on a journey. Thankfully, we're ahead on that journey, and we're there as a partner to them, not just as an investor, but to be a partner to help them as they learn how to also do more, measure more, and report more. It's a very concentrated portfolio. Our top 10 holdings account for about 60% of the portfolio.
Yeah. And
we've only got 25, 26 names. So the 1,600 companies, that falls off fairly quickly when you apply an ESG criteria to them. And we probably have a smart universe of 60 to 80 companies. And we're conviction-led. So we might start off with maybe a 2% allocation to a company. But as we get more comfortable with its performance, its governance, and how it's tackling the growth opportunities in Vietnam, it could end up at 4, 5, 6% in the portfolio. So we build our different levels of conviction up. Maybe we've got 5 companies that are at the highest level of conviction, maybe 10 at the medium level, and then 5 perhaps that are at the entry level. We like the businesses, but there's something we want to track their performance over a period of time. We're nimble, and I think actually nimbleness is part of our watchword. It's helped drive our outperformance. So we're not the largest fund manager in Vietnam, but we're certainly the most focused, and we can navigate very quickly around opportunities. So we're very nimble.
Now, quite a lot of managers who are sitting in your seat actually manage money in developed markets, North America or Europe. If I was to try and eke out of you the main differences of investing in a frontier market versus a developed market, what would you say?
Well, there's a lot of similarities. I mean, we're trying to find good growth at a reasonable valuation. But of course, you're dealing with a stock exchange which is quite young, 20 years old, and it's experienced tremendous growth. So perhaps the standards aren't quite at the same level as in a developed economy. So you've got to really take a private equity approach even to a public company. Understand the team dynamics and the management team of the company. Understand the board structure and the governance structure in that company. And be somewhat patient with these businesses. One of the differences perhaps is liquidity. So the markets in Vietnam are getting bigger and are getting deeper. And liquidity has gone up maybe 4 or 5 times in terms of daily average trading volume. But at times you have to be sure about the businesses you're in and build your stakes quite carefully and conscientiously, because they're not as liquid as perhaps they are in developed economies. Although today Vietnam's stock market has a daily volume of about $1 to $1.5 billion,
Okay, wow.
which is the second highest in Asia, second only to Thailand. So it's becoming more interesting for us in that regard. And because we're nimble and the size and the approach we take, we can invest in the smaller companies as well as the larger companies. But again, we need to be confident they have great growth prospects, that they have a chance to compound their earnings, and that they'll take our medicine. And by that I mean that they'll listen to where we're on our journey about responsible investing. They'll take our calls, take our meetings, and then we can have a dialogue with them. Many of those companies are still quite young.
Yeah.
The management teams are quite young. Maybe they've only been listed 5 years, at the most 20 years. So they're willing to learn. Sometimes they make mistakes, and sometimes we as an investor will make mistakes, but we have the ability to learn from those mistakes over the longer term.
Yeah.
We have a number of the companies which were formerly state-owned businesses, and then we have a number of companies which were entrepreneurially built. Interestingly, a number of our core holdings originally were private equity-backed businesses.
Yeah.
So they took the medicine then of a private equity investor, reporting by the numbers, adherence to ESG, good governance, and then when it came to the public markets, they're often better managed than perhaps some of the state-owned enterprises. So there's a real mixture. We're not quite at the level where there's kind of generational and succession change in those business. They're still kind of first generation entrepreneurs because the capital market story is still a young growth market in Vietnam. But there's a lovely combination of those formerly state-owned businesses as well as the younger, perhaps entrepreneurially driven businesses as well.
I'd love to do the sort of rocking chair test. If I were to ask you to reflect on the last 5 years, how would you summarize it, and what would you highlight as the major successes?
Know your businesses, get very close to those companies, back your winners.
Yeah.
There's great compounding earning opportunities in Vietnam, so back the winners, but be humble. Always be learning, have a growth mindset about our own capabilities, but also journey with some of those companies as they face up to challenges. And don't be too wedded to any one position. It sounds kind of counterintuitive. Back your winners and look for compounding growth, but also be prepared to take profit and leave some value for someone else as well.
Finally, a lot of people watch the show for information, education, learning from professional managers. If an investor wanted to learn more about Vietnam, the drivers of Vietnam, the companies in Vietnam, what would you recommend as a good source for them to look at?
Well, look, selfishly, we provide a lot of information on our website, in our annual reports and our monthly reports. We enjoy telling the story and the opportunity about Vietnam. I've had the privilege of going to Vietnam for the last 30 years, and I've seen tremendous change. I first went there in the early 1990s. I wrote to my mother, this is a land of great opportunity. This could be a new emerging tiger economy. And it certainly fulfilled all that potential and more. But nothing beats actually getting on a plane and going out and visiting it. It's a wonderful country to see, great beaches, tremendous food and lovely people. And that can really open your eyes to the opportunity. But short of that, there's plenty of kind of coverage about Vietnam. I say we have provided webinars and fact sheets and articles around that. So people can look at our LinkedIn and our social media and follow our website, and hopefully there's something there of interest. But pick up the phone, drop us an email. We're happy to share our experiences and welcome more investors to Vietnam Holding.
That's great. And for those of us who want to learn more, what is the website we should visit?
The web address is vietnamholding.com.
Craig, thank you so much for taking the time to come on to Vantage. It's been a huge pleasure learning about Vietnam Holding and your approach to investing. We look forward to having you back in a year or so when you come back to London. Thanks again for being on the show.
It's been my pleasure. Thank you so much, Neil.